Hi, my name is Riley Rourke, and I'm joined today by author Elizabeth Acevedo. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Riley.
And so we're here to talk about your new book, Anger is Only a Shadow. What can you tell us about it?
Anger is Only a Shadow is the story of Liliana. She is a 17-year-old, half Salvadoran, half Dominican American growing up in DC. And the story begins with her in a juvenile correction facility, and she is released with an ankle monitor. She has a brother who is undergoing a series of events that her family can't really explain. And they think that he might have mental illness. And the only person he wants to talk to is Liliana, who unfortunately is not supposed to leave the city. And so it is about a young woman who's trying to figure out what it means to do the right thing.
And so this is your first return to YA in around 6 years, right?
That's
What
right.
compels you to return to YA now, young adult, for those who don't know?
I'm often just drawn by the story that feels most urgent. And for me, this story about this young woman and what it means to find yourself, but also what it means to try to find community in a moment when I think that a lot of young people are experiencing loneliness and a lot of adults too, right? Like it is an epidemic of just like us existing in our silos. And I think a book about what it means to gather your people and to be with like-minded folks who hold space for you, even when you make huge mistakes, felt really important for the current climate.
Yeah, it was a very interesting concept when I was first sent it. I really, really was transfixed by it. And something that I loved reading was that you said that this book was one of those professors who kept their foot on my neck and that you learned a lot about yourself through the writing process. So, could you tell us a little bit more about the writing process and what you learned from it?
Yes. So I became a mom, maybe, 3 years ago, and a mom of two as of a year ago. And while I was writing and editing this book, I was pregnant or postpartum. And I think I learned that my relationship to time had to change. I'm used to I write very quickly and then edit very slowly, but I had to write slowly and edit slowly. So that's one thing I learned about the process, but also that the story is very reflective of my own personal life. I have a sibling who was diagnosed with schizophrenia when I was in college. And I think there were moments when I realized that I thought I had made peace with certain parts of those memories. And I was writing and I'd realized I'm not telling the truth, or there are parts of this story I'm scared of. And so the story required me to kind of face parts of myself that I didn't realize I was too scared to look at. And so, in many ways, it was a ruthless professor, as I had to kind of look at my own interiority and what needed to be on the page.
Yeah, and I think that's just so interesting. And you have this letter at the end of the book and at the beginning, both of which I loved reading. But you talk about your experiences at the Youth Services Center, I believe in DC, and how you
Yeah.
also pulled from those for
Yes.
the story. So could you tell us about those experiences as well?
Yes, I was a teaching artist. And I would go into I've gone into DC jail, which is where they hold the adults, but also the juvenile correction facility. And I worked with young women and young men, and I would go twice a week and I would do poetry workshops. And I
Yeah.
think so often you go into a space and you're worried, like, what if they don't have anything to write about? And what if they're like joking on me the whole time? And what is this going to feel like? And so often, these young people were looking for opportunities to be vulnerable, for
Yeah.
opportunities for someone to ask them, not like, what are you here for? Or like, how are you going to change your life when you get out? But just like, tell me the story of your name. Tell me a memory of food that you have that is related to someone you really love. And like, it would open them up in ways that I think would astonish most people who have never been in those spaces and that have very stereotypical ideas of like who are the young people that get incarcerated.
Yeah, and it's one of those, it's important and it's like to connect with someone about who they are as a person and not just like the actions that got them to a situation. And I think that's so great. Like we all have favorite foods and we all have
Yeah.
stories that are emotional and that make us who we are.
Yeah. And that these are children.
Yeah, they're
These are
children.
children. And so that it is also important to realize
Yeah,
that their ability to express themselves is a way to reflect and think and be kids in a space
yeah,
that may not always allow them that.
yeah. And they want to talk about their favorite TV shows and
Yes.
their favorite nerdy things and they look up to adults. I think that is so great. And one of the things that really, truly was my favorite part of this book was the way that you switch between poetry and verse, and it
Mhm.
reads so fluidly. And so
Mhm.
I want to know why you decided that this was the way to tell a little story.
I knew from the beginning that I wanted to do prose poems. I just
Yeah.
didn't know how. I didn't know what like prose that sounded that had the same fluidity as poetry, what that was going to look like. And then I began to distinguish that Lil writes and rewrites a prompt that she got at the juvenile detention facility, which is the where I'm from. And she writes it as where I'm from, where I'm going, where I've been, where I'm at, like who I'm from. And so
Yeah.
she is kind of that's her most poetic self where she reveals the parts that the main narrative doesn't say. But even the main narrative I think is very poetic, but I wanted to have a distinction between her innermost feelings and
Yeah.
how she revised parts of herself and how she saw her own progress, versus what was actually happening in, chronological time. There's like
Yeah.
her inner life and then her outward life, and the reader gets insight into both.
Yeah. And do you have like a favorite poem in the book?
There's a poem about the ciguapa that I love. The ciguapa is a Dominican myth of a woman with backward facing feet, and she can be known to be ferocious. And I love the way that I was able to kind of um, adopt that poem to be reflective of Lil and like her acceptance of the ferocity that she carries in her.
Yeah, I think that's a great choice. And something I ask all of the authors I interview is like, what is I mean, we're all at our core readers. What is a book that you're just obsessed with right now that you're reading?
There's a book by Julian Randall called Shook, which I love. It's a novel in verse about this middle schooler who wants to be on the basketball team. And the book begins with him getting an injury in the first like 20 pages. And just like what it means when you have this dream of who you're going to be, and then that has to shift. And you have to face a version of yourself that you regret
Yeah.
like who that person has to be. And so I think it's so lovely. It's about anxiety and young people and dreams and hopes and like what it means to re-envision yourself. And so folks should check that out, particularly if you have a middle schooler in your life.
Yes, that sounds great. I'm adding it to my list.
Yes.
So, Anchor's Only a Shadow comes out September 15th, correct?
Yes,
And
correct.
you're going on a book tour, which has a
I
stop in
am.
Boston. So, where can
I
people find you?
I will be at Brookline Booksmith, and you can find more information at Acevedo, Acevedo, Writes, Writes. And that's also my handle on social media, and I'll be posting a lot more information about my 17 tour stops.
Wow, it's an extensive tour. And they can get this book anywhere books are sold?
They can get this book anywhere books are sold.
Perfect. And I highly recommend everyone get their hands on it. Thank you
I
so much
agree.
for joining me.
Thank you. Take care, Riley.